All right, Trinity Church, how are you doing this morning? Man, you guys look great. Good to see you. I am just coming over from our friends at Light and Power who prayed for us. What a way to mess you up. Man, the love and the care in that room and the love and the care we know in this room as well is so rich. And we just want to say we love you. So, on limited sleep and crazy packing these last 2 days, we're going to see what comes out of my mouth, okay? And we're glad to get to enjoy this and be here with you today. My name's Todd Arnett, I'm lead pastor at Trinity Church, and we are continuing this series called This Is Love, looking at Jesus' last steps to the cross. And we're going to dive in today in the middle of chapter 18 of John's Gospel. So if you have a Bible and want to make your way there, that would be super. If you have notes, they're on the back or they are on our app, and you can pull that up and be able to connect a little bit that way as well. Well, I'm going to share a little bit at the end. I knew I couldn't do that until then, so I'll share a little bit of my heart before we wrap up today, but I want to continue in this passage and tell you about some things coming up that we're real excited about. Glad for the way that you were able to welcome and be excited for Josh and Katie. And so we're grateful for that new addition on our staff team. And man, when I see God just aligning loose ends at the end of our time here, it's been amazing. And so grateful for the elders' leadership, grateful for our staff. And just love those kind of announcements. We could talk about Morgan last week and Josh this week, and we're so grateful for that. Let me tell you about something that is near and dear to my heart that begins next Sunday, something we haven't done in a couple years because of COVID and whatnot, and that has been our Impact Offering. Impact Offering is really all about helping kids from Trinity Church get to camp, and that's all three of our camps, our elementary camp, K-5, our middle school summer camp, 6-8, and our high school camp, 9-12. And so when you give, next week we're going to begin this, and we want to give you a heads up so you can anticipate it. But next week you can give. The elders have voted to make this a special offering akin to what we do at Advent Conspiracy. Every dime you give is going to go towards helping kids get to camp. And one of the things that we're real excited about this year, all the time, it's been great because we never want financial reasons to be the reason a student or a child doesn't get to go to summer camp. And you have been so generous with this in the past that that has really never been the issue. It's not been, well, we just can't afford it. Trinity Church has really just been so great to give with generosity so people can, families can get their kids to camp. But as we were working, really appreciate the work by Walker and Kim as we would sit down and talk about Impact Offering. One of the things that was near and dear to all of our hearts has been camp. Kids camp isn't super expensive, but our middle school and high school camps especially are. It's just the nature of summer camp. And we've looked all over Southern California. We have 2 great camps. Our middle schoolers go to Pondo, and for the first time, high school is going to go to Thousand Pines up in Crestline. But of all the camps, they still are really expensive to go. And one thing that we've done is we've added a fourth piece of our pie as you give, and that is we're going to be able to create a part of the Impact Offering that just goes to what we call a multifamily discount. And so if you have multiple kids going to camp, you don't even have to sign up for any kind of financial aid. As you just sign them up, then we're going to give you a discount for your kids, knowing how many you have going. And we're just real excited about that because our whole goal is always in student and children's ministries is to come alongside and be great allies to you. So that all kicks off next Sunday. Be thoughtful, be prepared. You can do cash check. You can even give through the app. But we will have students and kids at the doors, and so it's hard to pass by them. If you're saying, Todd, is that manipulation? Absolutely. But I'm giving you a heads up so you don't come empty-handed. So help us out next week, get kids to camp. And the other thing I wanted to share with you, we've been talking about our excitement as grandparents about awaiting a new baby. This last week we found out Jack and Sky are having a boy. So we're excited about that and no longer have to just say a grandbaby boy. So we're looking forward. They're due mid-June, and Sky's just entered into her third trimester and excited to be there for all of that. Well, let's do this. We began chapter 18 last week in this part of John we're calling This Is Love. We're seeing Jesus demonstrate love. We're seeing Jesus teach about love. And ultimately, the greatest expression of love is going to be at the cross. And so throughout these last chapters 13 to 21 of John, it just seems so appropriate that that would be the big unifying idea of these 8 chapters. And so here we are, and we began last week in chapter 18. Earlier this month, we had this really unique opportunity to hear Jesus praying. It's almost this unique thing. If you've ever stumbled into a situation and heard someone just talking to the Lord, them and God, and you got to eavesdrop a little bit, that's what we got to do in John 17. And we saw Jesus pray for himself as he was entering into this last lap of the marathon. We see him praying for his 11 disciples, and we saw him pray for us, those who would put our faith in him because of the disciples' testimony. And here we are 2,000 years later, and that testimony is still being shared, and people are still coming to Christ. And we just love to be a part of that big picture gospel story. So we took it into this narrative where Jesus is arrested in the garden. And what we were impressed by is we were impressed by people, I got a little phlegmy over there. Getting love done so well this morning. We were impressed by people who would be so close in proximity to the power and authority of Jesus. Face to face, and in some ways, hand to ear, in proximity with his power, and yet all still refusing to believe he was who he said he was. And we left him last week being arrested and brought to Annas' home. The former chief priest, we'll look at that today, and about to be questioned. So we pick it up today, and we'll look at the narrative and see what happens in Annas' home and Jesus being questioned. But we'll also see this powerful reality of Peter doing exactly what Jesus had forecast, and the fact that he will deny he even knows who Jesus is 3 times. So we'll see that together, and we'll kind of walk it out. I want you to notice as we look at this today, try to find yourself somewhere in the sandals of the story. You know what's to come, but those 11 disciples didn't have a clue as to what was actually going to happen. And so imagine your leader that you've been with these last 3 years, imagine him being arrested, him being questioned, and what you're thinking about who he is and what he's going to do at that point. We pick it up in John chapter 18, beginning of verse 15. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter had to wait outside at the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the servant girl and on duty there, and brought Peter in. "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" she asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself. So we see that Peter and another disciple, everyone had scattered when Jesus was arrested. They bailed out when he might have needed them most. Thank you, bro. And within that whole context, we see Peter, though, now kind of from behind with a decent gap between him and Jesus and these arresting soldiers. He's following Jesus. The text tells us he's with another disciple, doesn't give a name. And some would say, well, maybe this was John, because John really never seems to refer to himself in his gospel, but things like the disciple whom Jesus loved. I think there's a lot of evidence it's probably not John. It's probably not even one of the 11, but another follower of Jesus who simply was known and connected to the religious elite. And this person was so known, could be, some have also surmised, Nicodemus, but is so known that he's able not only to get past those that are guarding at the doorway to Annas' home, but is able to come back and bring Peter in along into the courtyard as well. So Peter makes it that far in, and this other disciple is the ticket to be able to do that. As he enters into this high priest's courtyard, he's questioned by simply a servant. There's a young woman, a servant girl at the door, and she asked this interesting question: "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" And I don't know the inflection, right? When we have our New Testament, we don't know how to read the tone in which she said it, but I imagined a couple different ways she might have. It could come off as either a demeaning statement, demonstrating even a trace of disgust. "You aren't one of this man's disciples, are you?" Or it could have been maybe said of just passive inquiry. "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you? Are you hanging out with him?" Either way, we don't know the tone of what is said. We just know what is said. And no matter what the inflection, we see Peter's answer: "I am not." It reads precariously similar to something we read last week when the soldiers said they were looking for Jesus of Nazareth. I am. Peter says, "Uk eimi." I am not. I don't know the man. He's going to tell us later on. But when the soldiers came coming for Jesus, Jesus didn't hesitate, and he said, "Ego eimi." I am. I can't help but think that in John's gospel, there is meant to be some sort of play on words, some sort of reality that Jesus has all the confidence in the world about who he is, and yet Peter is absolutely afraid of being identified with that man. Powerful contrast in this moment. And I want to ask you a question I had to ask myself this week. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Have you ever been, you probably have not been, where there are armed guards who could take you into custody as well, but have you ever been in a situation where someone has point blanked you? Do you know this Jesus? Do you follow him as well? And you retreated from the moment? Some of us may have. I can honestly say I've never had that kind of point blank fear and confusion over what I should say if someone were to ask me such a question. But I will say this, what maybe some of us can relate to is something a little bit more like it. Not exact, but like it. I went back in my mind and I remembered my freshman year in college. And man, God had been doing a work. I had finished high school, and in that summer before I went away to school, God was just growing in me this great, intense desire for him. Wanted to know him, wanted to follow him, wanted to love him like I never had before. And I get there in my first semester, and I am growing leaps and bounds. I'm offering things over to the Lord I had held deeply to. I'm seeking him and pursuing him daily like I had never in my life done before. And what I would tell people when they would ask me, I'd come home on weekends, and they would say, "Todd, how is college going?" And I go, "Man, it is so good. God is so good and growing me in such rich ways. I'm so grateful for just the work he's doing in my life." And then homecoming came. The mighty T-Birds of Yucaipa used to play at U of R at football games, and I got out my Letterman jacket and showed up to my first graduated homecoming game. And I show up and I see my friends who are away at their different schools and whatnot, and we begin to start having conversations. And the conversations before that had been so thick with God is so good, look what he's doing in my life, became college is so great, I'm having such a blast. And I remember in real time as I was sharing with people going, why is this coming out differently? Why am I sharing in one time, in one audience with other believers? And that's how I would justify it in my head. Well, my unbelieving friends wouldn't understand that. And I realized real quick, it wasn't that at all. I just was uncomfortable speaking so much about a Jesus that I really hadn't spoken much about with them my whole time in high school. I have a feeling, though we might not have done the same thing that Peter did, that there are examples in our lives that we can look at and say, you know what? I have definitely downplayed. I've definitely omitted. I've definitely changed the tone of the conversation because I was afraid of how that might turn out, afraid of what someone might think, afraid of how they might consider me. So I have a feeling we've done this a little more than we might care to admit. So in your notes, I have this question for you. When you get put into an uncomfortable situations, do you start communicating more like an atheist than like a follower of Jesus? More like someone who's just devoid of God in their lives than someone who loves him and follows him wholeheartedly? And the simple reality, it's a great look in the mirror kind of question. God, I want to be that person who in every situation, in every day, is consistently yours. Talking, walking, living the way you would have me. Let's keep going. Chapter 18, verse 19. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. I have spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I always taught in synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Bring in witnesses. Surely they know what I said. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. Is this the way you answer the high priest? He demanded. If I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why do you strike me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Let's talk a little bit about this high priest language, right? Like, who's the high priest? How many of them are there? We first sent Jesus to Annas, calling him the high priest. Now, Annas is kind of done questioning him, sends him to Caiaphas, the high priest. We know they're related. Annas is Caiaphas' father-in-law, and going back into a little bit of Jewish history, we realize Annas had been the high priest and been deposed, been taken out of the role by Rome. There was something about the way he was leading that was either aggressive or in question, and was taken out of that position, interestingly enough, by a pagan government, says, no, you're no longer going to be that, and instead his son-in-law, Caiaphas, becomes the high priest. That's about AD 16, so Caiaphas has been doing this now for about 15 or more years. So the simple point is, the answer is yes. One was the high priest, one is the high priest, and the former high priest has still a lot of clout. So much so that that was the first place that the soldiers took Jesus to, was to be questioned by him. I want you to catch something that's easy for us to miss. This is going on late at night. And Jesus has just been arrested in a garden, completely without any pushback, completely without any sense, well, I guess fallback, they all fell down, but without this sense of trying to run away or anything. And you would think, we're talking like 2 a.m, you would think that they would go put him in a jail cell, and tomorrow, first thing, we're gonna see what you're all about. Nope. In the middle of the night, they take him to some guy's house. And without any sort of formal hearing, without any witnesses, that's what Jesus is bringing up. You're asking me questions about what I've said when there are plenty of people who've heard me over the course of the last 3 years. And if this is a trial, I don't know what this is, but if this was a trial, you would bring them up to speak. You would bring witnesses before me. So Jesus is kind of spinning this thing back and saying, I don't know what this is. But the simple reality is, if this was a trial, this would be done differently, because you wouldn't put me on the stand. You'd put other people who've heard me, and they would testify to what they've heard. So Jesus makes this statement, And to me, one of the most powerful things about this whole sequence of Jesus going to the cross, it's minor in terms of the physical pain he would experience, but it is major in terms of what leads up to it. But there's an official nearby that when Jesus makes this response, it says when Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. It's one thing to slap an arrested man in the face for answering in a way that you disapprove. It's another thing to slap in the face a rogue rabbi, a fellow religious leader, as it were, a teacher, to slap him in the face for maybe seemingly disrespecting a high priest. But it is from an entirely different universe when a mere mortal slaps the creator of the universe in the face and doesn't get fried on the spot. I remember reading this passage as a young man and just that sentence just coming off the page. Who on earth does he think he is? And maybe most importantly, who on earth does he not believe Jesus to be? This is a powerful moment in terms of missing the plot. In your notes, this is a long fill-in. The official had no idea that he was slapping the creator of the universe in the face. And yet all the while, the God-man restrains himself from reacting justly. Justice would have been, towards the being that he has given the very breath in his lungs. This is a picture of mercy, the official not getting what he deserved. The official not getting what he deserved, the definition of mercy. And the simple question is, what kind of God takes this kind of abuse from his own created beings? And you actually know the answer. The same kind of God that would let them nail him to a tree. This is love. This is the incarnation of love himself. Jesus responds to this pompous action by questioning the one who struck him, simply saying, "What did I say wrong? Was there untruth in what I asked in terms of the question? And if that's the case, then tell me that and let me be liable for it." And what I appreciate is Jesus just kind of staying consistent. I haven't done anything wrong, and yet you are slapping me, you are interrogating me, when everything I've done has been out in the open. From there, they take the bound Jesus to Caiaphas for yet another round of illegal treatment and bogus questionings in the middle of the night. So on the march continues. Let's keep going. Chapter 18, verse 25. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, you aren't one of his disciples too, are you? He denied it. Same phrase, uk emi, I am not. One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off. So we're talking an on-site witness to what Peter had done. He challenged him, "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Him being Jesus. Again, Peter denied it. And at that moment, a rooster began to crow. By the way, roosters usually crow. If you have a rooster, they crow way too early. You've probably turned them into a meal at some point. But what? 4 or 5 in the morning. So that's what I'm talking about. This is the rooster crowing actually makes sense to help us time this a little bit of how late into the night this has been. Back to Peter in the courtyard being questioned. Other gospel accounts mention the idea, we'll read it in a minute from Matthew's gospel, that there was something like, some of us might go, why do they keep picking on Peter? Like people who don't know him, this slave woman or those warming themselves around the fire, why do they keep thinking you must be associated with him? And part of the text is going to tell us that men from Galilee had an accent. Men from Galilee had a look. Okay, you are able, as you're out and about in the community, to identify, I don't think you're from here. It's not a horrible judgment. You're not being unkind. You can just detect some things about the way a person presents themselves. Sometimes you're wrong. In this case, they were right. Peter wasn't from Jerusalem, wasn't from the area, and they keep asking this question. Either way, once again, he rejects the idea that he's one of Jesus' disciples. And I want to ask a question you're wondering, one that I'm sure wondering. In the upper room, Jesus levels this powerful prophecy, this forecast. Peter, you say you're going to go to Jerusalem to die with me. I say you're going to act like you don't even know me 3 times before the rooster crows tonight. Complete contrast. They couldn't be more different of statements. So if you're Peter, wouldn't you think, upon hearing these words from Jesus and thinking, no way, you're so wrong, wouldn't you think he'd do everything he could to keep himself from situations where he might deny Jesus? If you've been asking that question, so have I. Just go anywhere you can to avoid the problem. If you're so concerned, I would hate to deny I even know Jesus, don't be in positions where you'd be asked. And I wonder how many times that night Peter was thinking back about that conversation, remembering what Jesus had said and trying to do everything to avoid it. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know if he thought twice about it. Not because he was callous, but think of the events of the night. It has been a long night. It has been a powerful night. It's been at times confusing, other times affirming, and your leader has just been arrested. You're all over the place. I think it reminds us that all the knowledge, all the forethought, all of the understanding, and all of the willpower that we can muster that might go into avoiding trying to not fail God, trying to not fail others, it still won't be enough to counter the fear of being singled out and persecuted. In your notes, we need something greater than fear to conquer our fears. A fear of being we need something greater than that. We need the Spirit's indwelling presence and power that gives us courage and boldness. We don't conquer fear by having greater fears. We conquer fear by the Spirit's work in our lives, transforming us with his presence, with his power. Jesus said as much about how they would testify about him through the power of the Spirit. Back to what we read in John 15, verse 26. When the advocate comes, another phrase for the Holy Spirit, whom I will send you from the Father, the Spirit of truth who goes out from the Father, what will he do? He will testify about me. So the Spirit's going to testify. How is he going to do that? Verse 27, and you also must testify. He uses mouths like yours, for you have been with me from the beginning. The Spirit's going to testify through you and the fact that your experiences, your firsthand testimony has been with me from the beginning. Well, and Peter has now denied that he even knows Jesus twice, but a third one comes, and it's not in the form of a question, it's more in the form of an accusation. Hey, wait a second, I saw you with him in the garden. I'm not even asking, I'm telling, I know you, and I know you were with him. By the way, you cut off my cousin's ear. I'm pretty sure that was you, okay? But I want you to see how Matthew retells this part of the story. Matthew 26, verse 73, after a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, surely you are one of them. Again, accusing, not questioning. Your accent gives you away. Remember I said there was something about the way he presented himself. They figured it out. Then he began to call down curses. And he swore at them, I don't know the man. Note the violent denial that Peter makes to justify his position. Not just, I don't know the man, but he began to call down curses and he swore at them. The Greek word translated here, curses, means to call down direst evils on, to curse vehemently. And you thought there was no cussing in the Bible. No, there is. See, I want you to get into this moment because it's not just Peter being afraid with being identified with Jesus. It's a full-scale cursing other people, a tirade for these people who are simply stating the truth, actually. They're not wrong. They're not lying, that he doesn't want to admit. He's going to great degrees to disassociate himself with Jesus, something that will be brought back to mind now, immediately. Matthew 26:74, immediately a rooster crowed. 3 times before the rooster crows tonight. I'm going to say this, you're going to want to stay tuned as we keep walking out this text. As other speakers come and finish up this great gospel of John into this next month, but I want to give you a spoiler alert. This is what makes Jesus' intentional reinstatement of Peter in John chapter 21 so incredibly powerful. Look in your notes. Peter goes to great lengths to deny that he knows Jesus, and accordingly, Jesus goes to great lengths to reestablish Peter as one of his own. Peter went to great lengths to deny, I don't even know the man. That means Jesus is going to go to great lengths to restore him, to bring him back and make him know he's his own. I'm excited. Next week, Trinity's own Doug Baker, retired pastor of 30 years, is going to be here to finish up chapter 18. You'll have a guest speaker named Steve Musto the following week, and then elders have been working really tirelessly to get this nailed down, but our good friend Rick Langer is putting together some Biola profs that'll be here, and they'll be here in this next interim season, including Rick himself. So you're going to finish out John's gospel in the month of April, and it's going to be a rich thing to see all this come together and realize this is what love looks like. I told you I wanted to take a few minutes just to communicate my heart. On behalf of me and Joanna and Ellie and our kids, everyone but Kendi was able to make it last Sunday. And man, I'm just saying we have felt so loved. We have felt this season of different goodbyes with the staff, goodbyes with the elders, goodbyes with you, your incredibly thoughtful generosity, your kind words of affirmation and encouragement, your love has just been so palpable, and we are so grateful for it. Many of you have been in the trenches with us in a difficult season. And I love this. My good friend Ray Johnston, he said to me numerous times, Todd, as your challenge goes up, your need for support goes up equally. And can I just say you have been that? Those of you who have just said, I'm going to walk alongside leaders at Trinity in a tough season, thank you. Thank you, because as the challenge has risen, so has your support and encouragement. And during these times that have been difficult, been a time of growing for me, I want to thank Trinity Church for that as well. Because in the middle of that, I have learned to lean upon and rely upon the Lord in brand new ways I had not been asked to before. And I'm better for it. I'm a better son to a heavenly Father. I'm a better follower of Jesus. I'm a better husband and father, pastor and leader because of my 5.5 years here with you. And I'm really grateful for that. And I walk away marked in a good way. So thank you for the ways you've helped me grow. Some of you were here on my very first Sunday, 5.5 years ago. And you might not remember you were, but when I start to tell you this next part, you'll go, oh yeah, that was weird. I was excited to start a brand new series in Ephesians. It was great. Our comm team gave me a great poster version of that graphic. This is a football. Prior to that, though, on that very first Sunday of August of 2016, I did a kind of an overview of the book, my favorite book of the Old Testament, the book of Deuteronomy. I love this book because it's people on the east side of the Jordan being called to cross the Jordan and go take the promises that God's going to give them in the book of Joshua. But as Moses is recounting what the last 40 years have been, he keeps calling them to a point of covenant. He keeps calling them to a point of commitment. And to me, that was just a really rich day to do that. And so I did this big overview of this whole book in one day. And some of you were like, what on earth did we get into? This guy is nuts. That's probably what makes today especially difficult for me. Is that it seems we didn't make it. We're on the east side of the Jordan. I think as a church, we've actually made it out into the river a little bit. Remember that powerful miracle, what God had done for their parents and splitting the Red Sea, he does for their children. And he splits the Jordan, and they walk out into it in faith that it's not going to come collapsing on them. I feel like we're out in the middle somewhere, not able to get to what we had desired to do. And it's hard for anything in our lives to see things unfinished, to see things we had set out to accomplish not take place. Even today's message is really a fitting thing. I leave you right in the middle of John 18. What? But it's a great illustration of the bigger picture, a great illustration of this idea that we got to start some things, but we didn't get to finish. That first Sunday, by the way, I didn't just talk about people of covenant. I asked you to make a covenant, which probably was the most odd thing. Who is this guy and what on earth is he asking us to do? A covenant's a big deal. I don't want to just commit to something. And that day, we kind of made copies of cards like this and said, would you commit to Jesus, the leader of Trinity Church? Would you commit to the human leaders he's put in place to be these kind of people? Many of you filled that out. Many of you kept a copy or put one in the thing just as a reminder to us as a staff. But that day, I actually made a covenant to you. And these are the things I said I would do. I covenant before the Lord to abide in the vine, in Jesus, so that I can live in his power and strength and nutrition, expecting that he will bear fruit through my branch that will be evident to all. I covenant before the Lord to continue to grow in oneness in my marriage with Joanna so that we can both enjoy and demonstrate God's design of oneness. I covenant to be the kind of dad my kids need and expect, as I acknowledge that they are the innermost circle of my relational world, who need a dad who lives out what he tells others he believes. I covenant to provide leadership along with the Trinity Elder Board as we protect the flock from potential harm and from missing the plot altogether. I covenant to serve alongside the Trinity pastoral team as we care for the flock in so many different ways in order to equip them to become all that God has designed them to be. I covenant to agitate the flock when we become lax in or distracted from pursuing our Savior's mission to rescue a lost world. I covenant to engage my relational world with Jesus' influence with the goal of them being drawn to him through my life. And I covenant to pray harder than I work, because when I work, but when I pray, God works. That's what it's been about. Not perfect at all, but that's what it's been about in these last 5.5 years. And it was powerful to reread that this week and go, those are still good things to be committed to, still good things to covenant with one another. So let me finish this last worship service with you today, even as things are undone and not complete, by giving you this charge to move forward. Would you make the mission of Trinity Church your mission? that you would live a life rooted in Jesus as you're reaching your relational world. Would you pray for, overtly support, and obviously encourage your elders and staff who are qualified, quality leaders, who are seeking Jesus' best for Jesus' church, this church called Trinity? And would you ask yourself every morning the question that is my morning ritual now? What does love require of me today? Because when you live out that answer, you are doing what Paul said, the greatest of these is love. I'd love to pray over you. So, Father, I thank you for this congregation. I thank you for this family. I thank you for this local expression of your bride, Trinity Church. I thank you so much for who they are. I thank you so much for how they have invested themselves to want to be who you've called them to be, to want to walk by your Spirit, living out your good, living out your mission, living out your love. And my prayer for them moving forward is that you would be oh so present, and would your indwelling Spirit be oh so powerful. Would they, as a family, God, as a body, move forward together into everything you have for them. And you know my heart beats with this great sense of just appreciation and gratitude. It also beats with blessing. And so this morning I would pray this over you. The Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. May his favor be upon you for 1,000 generations in your family and your children and their children and their children. May his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you. He is with you. In the morning, in the evening, in your coming, in your going, in your weeping and rejoicing, he is for you. He is for you. The Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen.